Have you ever eaten a banana right off the tree?
It's Sissy's soup.
Well, I've got a good story for you today. This is a story about my grandma's oldest sister. We called her Aunt Sookie. I was scared to death of Aunt Sookie as a child. I have no idea why. She wasn't mean, at least not to me, but she was odd. Grandma told me that when she was young, Aunt Sookie tripped and fell onto an old-fashioned pump. You know, the kind with a handle? And she hit her head, and that's how they explained her strange behavior. She just didn't react to things the way other people did. The last time I saw her, Bubba and I went over to see her together. I was trying to tell her that I had seen a neighbor of hers at the grocery store, but I couldn't get through a sentence because Aunt Sookie kept interrupting me, and she would say yes, ma'am. Well, it went kind of like this. I said, Aunt Sookie, I went to the cash and carry to get some paper towel, and I ran into, say yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I ran into Rodney. Say yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Rodney, I ran into Mr. Rodney. Say yes, ma'am. Well, somewhere in there, Bubba's eye caught mine, and we both got tickled, and we laughed so hard we almost cried. Aunt Sookie looked at us and said, "You children are both crazy." That was sobering. When we were little, some dear friends of ours lived right next door to Aunt Sookie. In fact, they lived in the very house my mama was born in, right on the river. Bubba used to go over there to play with their son Butch. Now, Butch and Bubba were like oil and water together, but because the families were close, they were together all the time. Well, this one day, Butch and Bubba were playing together at Butch's house. And remember, Butch lived next door to Aunt Sookie, who also lived on the river. But there was a grove of banana trees in between Aunt Sookie's house and the river. Anyway, the two boys were playing together, and they got a hold of some machetes. We used to have things like that laying around. And they got out in that banana grove and started chopping on things. It's not very hard to chop down a banana tree. So they cut a path through the banana trees, just chopped them down with those machetes. And then they saw this one tree with a big bunch of bananas that were almost ripe. And that's the way you get bananas, right before they're ripe. Well, they decided they wanted them. And they couldn't have been more than 8 years old. But anyway, they chopped down that banana tree and took the bunch of bananas back over to Butch's house. Well, when Butch's mama saw those bananas and realized where they came from, she had a conniption fit. She fussed at Bubba and Butch and said they were going straight over to Aunt Sookie's and confess. The boys were scared silly. They weren't sure what was going to happen. Even Butch was scared of Aunt Sookie. So his mama marched those two right over to Aunt Sookie's. And when they got in Aunt Sookie's yard, one of her grown daughters was getting in her car, and she looked at Butch and Bubba and said, "When Mama finds out what you two boys done, she's gonna kill you." Well, now the boys were truly terrified. But Butch's mama marched them right up there to the porch. And Aunt Sookie was rocking in her rocking chair. She had a big bosom, and she had silver hair that was always in braids that she pinned up in a little circle on her head like it was a crown. Butch's mama said, "These boys have something they'd like to tell you." But Aunt Sookie ignored the boys altogether and started talking to Butch's mama. "Ain't it awful hot? It hadn't been hot like this in 30 years, and so forth and so on. Finally, Butch's mama said, again, "Miss Sookie, these boys have something they need to tell you." Bubba says he saw his life pass right before his eyes, which couldn't have taken long. He was only 8 years old. He didn't know what was going to happen. Well, those two boys on the verge of tears sputtered and stammered out their confession. And then they waited to see what Aunt Sookie was going to say or do. She didn't even look at them. But all of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, she said, "Boys will be boys." And she went on talking to Butch's mama, who snickered a little bit because it was strange. Well, that was the end of it. Bubba says all three of them were stunned. Even Butch's mama didn't know what to say. Oh, so they hung up those bananas in the shed over at Butch's house to ripen. Bubba says all that trouble and he doesn't remember getting to eat even one of those bananas. Well, that's all the time I've got for you today. And as bad as I hate to, I have to say, it's good to quit talking to you. Now go eat a banana. Go on, just do it. You'll be a better person for it. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.